Trade agreements are complex and they take a long time to complete, as we are learning from the current AFCFTA on the continent. Trade and industrial policy certainly go hand in hand. Very difficult to divorce the two from each other. And in an industrial policy space, especially over the last few years, it become extremely busy. Protectionism is rising everywhere. Barriers are going up, especially in the northern hemisphere, between the US and China as well. But you need deep pockets to protect, and South Africa does not have deep pockets. And when the protection has no sunset clauses, you can quickly protect your consumers into poverty. We are a small and open economy in South Africa. We make up about 0.5% of global output if you measure it by GDP, and almost 2/3 of economic activity in South Africa is made up of trade. Trade being the sum of exports and imports, goods and services combined. So what we trade and how much we trade matters, and it matters a lot. Our international relations therefore matter because typically these are a precursor to what we actually end up trading. And I'm going to touch on BRICS in the conversation this morning. Even though BRICS is not a trade agreement, it does not have an agreement, I do believe. It is rather sort of a loose association of countries with nothing in common really to unify them. But we're going to talk about that. So who do we export to? Who do we export to and what do we export? These things matter. And how has this changed over the last 3 decades? We export more to Africa today compared to the last 3 decades. We export more to Asia than to Europe today. In fact, our largest bilateral trade relationship is with China. We don't have a trade agreement with China. We're going to ask the question this morning, do we need one? Why the focus on exports, one may ask. I think the reason an export-focused trade policy tends to generate significant economic gains over the long term is because to export at scale requires an exporter to be competitive. It's very difficult to play in the international game unless you are competitive. South Africa remains a primary commodity economy. It doesn't matter which way we slice or dice it. We do make cars and we do export food, but these are nothing compared to the metals and minerals that we actually import or export. Sorry. Mining allows us to earn valuable foreign exchange to afford our imports. When we cannot go from pit to port in a globally competitive way, then we export less metals and minerals, as we have over the last 5 years in terms of the volumes. But no, Francois, you don't understand. We should rather beneficiate our ore before we send it out. And this will solve our growth issues, is what I hear constantly, especially among the MBA members. I have bad news, it won't. Because for that we need electricity and we need competitive rail. Australia is rich even though they can't spell beneficiation. But they've become global leaders from pit to port and also at mechanizing and automating the actual pit operations. They have risk because of the concentration, but they also have prosperity. Who do we import from? On the flip side of the coin, we import more from both Asia and Africa today compared to 3 decades ago. What do we not think about when it comes to exports? And this is something that is not talked about. Imports are nothing else than the equivalent of buying another country's functioning education system. It's nothing else than buying another country's functioning electricity system. It's nothing else than buying another country's functioning transport system. Imports are not bad and exports are good. It is too simple a way to think about the global economy, especially one that has so many deeply specialized global value chains. What we import a far more diverse basket compared to what we actually export. We should not think like a mercantilist and think that exports are good and imports are bad. We should think about imports that we need, especially the intermediary imports, to come into the country, combined with local labor, combined with other local inputs, can be transformed in order to be exported again. So that is rather fundamental. I have borrowed a little bit from Donald's work. Why do we have trade agreements? In essence, a trade agreement can be considered to be successful if it meets three criteria. If it increases the volume of trade between two countries or two regions, if it makes imported raw materials more affordable than if the agreement was not in place, and if it allows for growth of exports of which benefit from the agreement. Before we go to the conversation, I want to sort of leave you on a philosophical note when it comes to thinking about or protecting industries, especially via import tariffs. This is a quote from Henry George about import protection and tariffs. And he said this more than 100 years ago. In time of war, we blockade our enemies to prevent them from getting goods from us. In time of peace, we do to ourselves via tariffs what we do to our enemies in times of war.